Welcome to the AgEmerge podcast, brought to you by Ag Solutions Network. Your farming challenges are unique, so your practices should be too. We're here to share emerging ideas, build connections, and provoke conversation.
Get ready to improve your soil, your crops, your livestock, and your family's livelihood. I'm your producer, Kim Chase.
And I'm your host, Monty Bottens. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for joining us. You know, when we talk about bringing you thought leaders in the ag space, Dr. Pam Marrone, our guest today, is a fantastic example. Dr. Marrone spent her 30-plus year career focused on biological products for pest management and plant health, having started and led 3 bioag companies. She's a scientist, a CEO, a serial entrepreneur, a pioneer, and that's just the short list. In her words, she says she got hooked on microbes early on and spent her career looking for environmentally responsible, biologically based solutions. By the end of this podcast, I'm pretty sure you're going to be hooked on microbes too. So let's just jump right in.
Welcome to this edition of the AgEmerge podcast. Very fortunate to be joined by Dr. Pam Marrone today. Hi, Pam. Thanks for being a part of the podcast.
Well, great to be here. Thank you.
Well, it's exciting. I've known Dr. Marrone and her work, known of her and her work for probably 10, 15 years, and what she's done with Marrone Bioinnovations and several of the other things she's involved with. We've met each other in ag tech circles, passing in hallways and those kind of things, but looking forward to get to spend a little bit of time with you today and get to know you better and share your story with our audience.
Always great to talk about ag bio and ag tech.
There you go. Well, it's certainly the frontier in agriculture right now. And I just would like for you to catch our listeners up to speed. Tell us your story, how you got started and where you've come to today, and a little bit of the why behind it. What motivates you to do what you do?
Well, I'm going to go way back. So I'm here at my mom's today in Southern Connecticut. Grew up on 40 acres in beautiful woods and a 2-acre bass fishing and swimming pond and a little mini farm. And so I got interested in bugs, majored in entomology, and then was recruited to Monsanto company. And on the ground floor, they were transitioning the company from a chemical company to a bio company. And I was asked to start up a new unit looking for new ways to control pests, and ended up screening microorganisms. Now, this is back in like 1983. So this is way ahead of my time. So we screened hundreds and thousands of microorganisms and developed the first high throughput screening mechanisms that are in a corn rootworm artificial diet to do it, that is still in use today. So I got hooked on microbes back then and spent my career looking for microbes in natural substances to control pests and increase plant growth. So after Monsanto, I was recruited by Denmark-based Novo Nordisk to start up a company in Davis, California. So moved from St. Louis to Davis and set up Entotech to screen microbes, looking for natural products, and screened over 50,000 microbes. And they sold us to our largest competitor when they had, which is now Valent Biosciences, when they had some issues in their core insulin business. And I started up AgriQuest in 95 and discovered Serenade and Sonata, line of products that are now standards and in the biofungicide realm. And I left in 2006 to start up Marrone Bioinnovations. And as many know, that AgriQuest was sold in 2012 to Bayer Crop Science for almost $500 million. And I had already started up Marrone Bio, took it public in 2013. And then after almost 15 years, stepped down as CEO, and which is a long run. And now I am advising, I'm still on the board, but I'm also advising many startups from farm to fork, and also some life science pharma companies as well.
Well, what a journey. That's amazing. And if you're doing that back in 1983, that was, I mean, what were the tools you were working with? Did you have DNA sequencing that you could use, or I mean,
no,
it was very primitive. You were looking at what? Probably Petri dishes or
Petri dishes.
Propagated.
Well, I was at Monsanto when they transformed the first lump of plant cells, tobacco and petunia, with a BT protein. So it was way, way back then. And see, in AgriQuest, we discovered Serenade in probably 95, 96 timeframe, which is was identified as a Bacillus subtilis back then because we didn't have the sequencing tools. So it has been since reclassified to a Bacillus amyloliquefaciens. So it's interesting. The technology has changed so dramatically during the course of my career. And that's what makes it very exciting today, because biologicals enabled by today's technologies, genomics, bioinformatics, and fermentation science, synthetic biology, gene editing, whatever, is allowing products to become better and better and better, and farmers are getting more and more information about how these products work.
It is interesting.
We're taking a short break to share that the AgEmerge podcast is brought to you by the team at Ag Solutions Network. Rooted in innovation, ASN is committed to leaving the land better than we found it, not simply maintaining it. We're here to help you navigate the balancing act of productivity and building a legacy. From practices to products, ASN is more than a new jug. It's a new way of thinking. So don't be afraid to be different. Be afraid to be the same. Contact Ag Solutions Network today at asn.farm. And now, back to our show.
Talk to us a little bit about, the biocontrol world as an example. That's kind of, now you're expanding into the plant nutrition side too. But how do they work? And what is behind them all, and why that's so important for today?
Well, there's two kinds of biocontrol organisms. There's ones that are living, and then that, like bacteria or fungi, that colonize the plant, the roots, and can have multi modes of action and can colonize through the season and ward off pests or increase the plant's immune system, compete with the pathogens or insects. Then there's ones like Marrone Bio has typically focused on, although we do have some living, and that is microbes that are dependent on, the product is dependent on the metabolites or the compounds, the natural compounds excreted or made by the microorganism, or in a plant, in the case of a plant extract. And then you're relying on really natural compounds. Instead of synthetically made, they're made in fermentation, and instead of one single chemical, like a synthetic chemical, there'd be a suite of compounds, because microbes and plants make whole cocktails of compounds. And then we optimize those compounds in fermentation or manufacturing extraction in the case of a plant, so that every batch that you make has a specific level of those compounds that control the pest. So the modes of actions of biologicals are often very different from chemicals. They could be a lot slower. They could stop feeding, or stop feeding right away, but not kill the bug right away, and or affect the plant and the plant's ability to be healthier, affect the immune system. So you have to look at the system more holistically, and not just count dead bugs when you're looking at biologicals versus chemicals.
Because you're also deterring pests, you're maybe interrupting mating,
and molting, interrupting mating, like in the pheromones, interrupting molting in the case of Marrone Bio's products, venerate in the case of Grandivo feeding. So the modes of actions are very different, and unfortunately, there's still a false comparison, because a lot of folks will test a chemical and say, after 48 hours, how many dead bugs are there? And compare it to the biological and say, the biological didn't work. But that is a false comparison, because if you look at marketable yield, if you look at quality of the crop, the farmer's return on investment, that's where the ability to export without residue concerns and get back into the field faster, these types of things are what makes biologicals shine. And so again, you can't just look at how many dead bugs after 48 hours, but unfortunately, that's still often the comparison.
So, early on when you were doing this, Pam, what was that like to really retrain the industry what to look at? Not only were you dealing with researchers, but with all the PCAs, they're looking for dead bugs and such. You're saying, okay, may not have the dead bugs, but the bugs aren't doing the damage, or they've moved on, or they're not reproducing, those kind of things. What were some of to shift that paradigm? What was that like, and what were some of the frustrations you had to deal with in that?
You have the right word, and that is shifting the paradigm, because it was so long ago when we discovered Serenade, and folks would say, compare it side by side to a chemical fungicide, which was systemic, and Serenade was preventative, and say, well, it doesn't work. And I say, well, let's look at integrated programs. So shifting the mindset from standalone to integrated programs, and that's where it is, where we had to shift the paradigm way back when, and still shifting. It's not completely finished yet. There's still folks looking at standalone versus integrated programs. So when you integrate the biologicals in with the chemical solutions, for resistance management, so you can delay development of resistance, or at the end of the season for residue management, or in the beginning to get a hold of the population before it builds up. And then some in between for resistance management. So when you use these products in integrated programs, there's often a synergy in that the program overall is better than the chemical only program. And we showed that time and time again. So I did a heck of a lot of grower demos. I remember sending the sales guy in Northern California out to get Serenade on the farm in grape growers. And he dropped off a bag, and I paid him $100 a demo. And so he did, he ended up doing 50 demos. So he made a lot of money. And, but just getting it out so people could see, okay, do a block here with our product integrated into your program, to your traditional program, and let's see the results. And that generally works that works every time. And that's how you get the adoption. Yeah.
And plus, there is a dynamic to it, because it is a system with a biological control that, whether plant growth stage, plant nutritional status, irrigation status, all those things can create a few more nuances in the repeatability effect, right? So, I mean,
that's right.
There's some things that have to go into consideration there, where you might have the guy that's like, well, it didn't work this time. Well, there was 3 other things that didn't line up. So,
consistency is really critical. And, there's some organic growers have fewer solutions. And let's take brown rot in stone fruit in California. Okay. A tough one. And, the growers will tell me, well, if you have a product that is 65% percent at reducing brown rot, and it's that every time, I'll take that. I'll take that consistency rather than 90% one time, then 50% another time. And so it's that consistency that's really important. And understanding the product and how to use it can certainly reduce the variability and make it more consistent, for sure. Yeah.
So those are the pioneering days, and you've got a lot of understanding now, especially like you said with genomics and DNA mapping and everything that we can do today. We have so many more tools to where biologicals can be developed so much quicker. That's kind of history. Where do you see this all heading in the future? Paint the picture of the next 5 to 10 years with biological controls and or biological nutrition, or other ways that biologicals are going to impact agriculture.
Well, I think we're going from a chemical intensive agriculture to a biointensive agriculture. So right now it's, chemicals as the base of the program, and dial in biologicals where you can't use chemicals, like I said, at the end of the season, or you need to manage resistance or what have you. And I see us going to biologicals as the base of the program, and then only using reduced risk chemicals when you need to. And I think that's where the consumer is driving it, and because the products are getting better and better with the tools, the scientific tools that we have today. Growers don't have to sacrifice on efficacy and consistency with biologicals. So, we're going to have biologicals that, and we do, fix nitrogen and can replace and reduce chemical fertilizers and boost plant growth, and biostimulants and biologicals that boost plant growth. And what I see is that farmers are asking now, what does your product do to my soil? Because soil health, now USDA, NRCS, and so many NGOs and everybody focused on soil health and carbon sequestration, reducing carbon footprint of agriculture. So farmers are saying, when I go out, they're saying, well, what does that product do to my soil microbiome? And I'm like, wow, they're asking that question. So it's going to be just a standard practice that you as an input supplier is going to have to know what your product does to a farmer's soil. And they're going to start comparing the micro profile before and after, and the micro profile of your product after its use compared to your competitors. That's really where it's going. And what's exciting is that I'm seeing results from Marrone Bio's products and other products of companies I'm advising that are having a really positive influence on the soil health and microbiome. For example, one company that has a biofertilizer has shown that they can increase the microbes that take up nitrogen in the plant, help the plant take up nitrogen. They can also increase the microbes that sequester carbon. Well, this is fantastic, 1-2 punch. In addition, the product also increased the biocontrol fungi in the soil that were responsible for controlling nematodes. Wow, 1-2-3 punch. So these are the kinds of data that we're getting, and very exciting. But where we really ultimately need to get to is that farmers will get payments, carbon credits for using biologicals. So now we're at the cusp of this with cover crops and crop rotation and other, sustainable or regenerative practices. But we have the data now. There's no question the data is coming out that using biologicals, whether it's a biofertilizer, bionutrition product, a bioprotection, biopesticide product, or biostimulant, have the positive benefits on reducing carbon footprint. And so farmers need to get paid for doing that. And I think that will certainly dramatically increase the adoption of these types of products.
That's a great point. Boy, there's a lot to unpack there. I want to dive into it a little bit deeper. And you said, about the soil health. And when you think about it, how many things have we learned about on the chemistry side of things that now 20 years later, there's a lot of unintended consequences, right? So
right.
We have some soil health related issues. We have some human health related issues to a very popular metal chelator. There's other groundwater issues with various, other chemistries we use for herbicides. There's issues with insects, with the neonic families. And, all of those kind of are unintended consequences. The fun part is what we hear with the biological-based controls, because it's basically using modern energy. It's allowing a natural system to assimilate it in the way that is best for that natural system. You're getting these unintended benefits, like
that's right.
Saying, yes, we control the pest, but all of a sudden, yes, we're auxiliary controlling a fungicide or a fungal species that's negative, which thereby is improving soil, probably bulk density, aeration, those kind of things.
That's right.
What are the risks, in your professional opinion, of the unintended consequence thing, where let's say 20 years from now, we get a lawsuit handed down and, billions of dollars are paid out. What is the risks with biological controls versus what we've done here in the past with chemistry-based controls?
What I say to that question is that, so the first biological pesticide was BT, and it came out, oh gosh, it's got to be 70 years ago. And so we have a very well regulated system at the EPA, and it is a tiered risk process. So that has served us extremely well. But these products are very biodegradable. So it's very, I just don't see cases where where these products persist and now if you have living microbes, they may stay in the soil and persist over the next season. But what the data is showing is that plants recruit microbes, and those consortia of microbes that are associated with plants often can be pretty stable. There is an environment and genetic interaction, plant and environment for sure. But more and more, breeders are going to have to look at what they're doing on breeding, because it's the plant that's signaling the microbes. So companies that are providing products that, biologicals, that microbes to the soil, living soil during the season, a lot of times those are temporary benefits. So you get a boost in yield and quality, but the soil, the microbiome often goes back to where it was before. So, so far, we're not seeing that there's these kind of unintended consequences. Nature seems to have its way of doing things, and we can supplement that to a certain degree, but not dramatically shift the patterns that are there. And that's a good thing, because there just have not been, any single bad consequence of a biological in 70 years. So
I think that's a very important point for consumers to know, and also farmers will be reassured by that too. And that's why I wanted you to make that. And I would also say that, the thing is when you look at biologicals, 1 teaspoon of soil containing 6 billion microorganisms, and you take that across the acre and you take the diversity of the microorganisms that exist in that soil. And oftentimes, some of the earlier companies that are out there selling this one bug, is great to grow your crop, or these 4 bugs are great. And I just kind of chuckle sometimes because I'm thinking there's billions upon billions of organisms, and we think that in our vain human mind that, a couple of them are going to change. Now, that is getting better these days as we learn specific things that we can inoculate in certain ways. But
Yes.
I mean, in the early days, that was kind of hit or miss. And a lot of times
It was because there's a lot of bugs in the jug. Yeah, there are a lot of bugs in the jug, or bathtub brews, as I call them.
Yeah.
And someone providing, bugs in a jug and saying, this is the best brew and it's going to help you. And it may have, but the science is showing that, that there's, you may not need to have 500 microbes in your jug to do it. There's a minimum functional level of microbes that's doing the thing in the soil. And as I said, I looked across studies of strawberry, corn, soy, brassica, and a couple others where it's the plant, the variety of plant, the genotype of the plant that is actually recruiting the microbes. So you can change somewhat, and definitely, no question, in season, you can change and have a benefit to the crop growth with your consortium or even single microbes for sure. But at the end of the day, there's a lot more we have to unravel. And like you said, we're at the just very early stages of discovering. There's so much more out in the microbiology world we haven't really discovered yet. I mean, it's amazing. It's just amazing. Yeah.
Well, we had the pleasure of Dr. James White being on the podcast early, but he also presented at our very first AgEmerge conference, and just that groundbreaking research him and his team came up with, that plants are propagating microbes and sending them into the soil to get nutrients to bring them back. It's like all of a sudden the plant isn't just this helpless thing sitting there hoping
That's right.
something happens to it. The plant is controlling the biome, and it just blows your mind. And as we keep gaining those understandings, I think we'll get better and better in product development and assistance.
And breeding, plant breeding.
Right.
Yeah.
Because what are we breeding for now? And this, okay, you got me caught on something here, Pam. I get so upset because all of our breeding is done on flat black soils. I'm talking corn, soybean world now in the corn belt, or you can talk on specialty crops. It's always in the most perfect conditions. It's tilled to 9 ways that it more than what it should be. The nutrient levels are on overload. And
Exactly.
we're putting it in all of this, and great, we are selecting plants that are great for that system. Now
Exactly.
we do a nutrient reduced strategy like we recommend in no-till, in more not marginal, but in tougher conditions. And those plants just don't perform at the level if they would have been selected and bred for those. So
that's right. And the good
there's
news is that, the good news is that everyone's becoming aware of this, and there's companies popping up to now breed for a more regenerative system where we're going to be incorporating cover crops and breeding varieties that don't need as much, are not built for so much chemical fertilizer. So it can allow them to not be so lazy, and they'll start recruiting the microbes again. Yeah.
And one other thing I think that to unpack on what you said there is about the consumers. And consumers are really driving for pesticide-free, chemical-free type agriculture. And I think something else that the consumers are driving for is the non-GMO status of it too. So there's some interesting things with the biocontrols that allow us to really kind of move away from all those things.
Yeah, that's true. And we're not there yet. I mean, there's a lot of the Marrone bioproducts and others are used on top of, traded
Correct.
products, and so can enhance those. But you're right. The consumer is certainly driving that. And every time you see a survey from consumers, and it drives agricultural scientists crazy and farmers crazy, because consumers don't care so much about the science. They speak to their values,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't like chemicals. So that becomes a problem, for traditional ag. But what we do in the biological industry is we like to highlight the benefits of our products in an integrated system. And we're at one point in time on the shift to a more ecologically based biointensive program, and we're moving that continuum along the way.
Yeah, and I think that's important because at the end of the day, we have to be responsible to our customer, right? And if that's what they want, then as farmers, as industry, we need to give the customer what they want, right or wrong, right?
Yeah.
But talking a little bit about as you were, the businesses that you're in your own business, and you had to pioneer many things and regulations that probably didn't even have regulations for.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and navigate that as a startup company, and all the proof that you'd have to do for EPA and other related concerns. What kind of impact did that have on your ability to innovate? And what is good regulation? What is obnoxious? And how does all that balance come in as we move into the bio related world?
Yeah, it was really difficult to navigate, to get biologicals through some years ago. And then there was the creation of the Biopesticide Pollution Prevention Division. Mm-hmm. And once that was created, then we had our own division. But still, it really was at the whims of who was running it and the appointees above, whether that was enforced or not, or how it was managed. And so in 2001, it was called the Biopesticide Industry Alliance, which I started in 2000. It's now called the Bioproducts Industry Alliance. I got together a group of founding companies and started this trade group, which is now going strong, and it's added in biostimulants in addition to biopesticides. We joined up with the big ag chem companies and the enviro groups and got the Pesticide Registration Improvement Act, PREA, passed in 2001, and it's been reauthorized unanimously by Congress several more times to give a level of predictability to when products will get out the door. Now that changed depending on, again, who was running the show at the EPA, and we had a really tough time back in the recessionary times of 2008 when things just started coming to a halt, and it was dire for small companies like ours, where you're trying to get your product out the door. So my board of directors, which was largely venture capitalists, said, "Pam, I'm sorry. The fact that you can't get your product through regulatory is not a good excuse." I'm going like, well, they said, "Well, go to Washington." I said, "Okay." So I hired a lobbyist. It was the best $100,000 I ever spent. And we had meetings. So Feinstein staff and Garamendi staff and Debbie Stavinos, because we have a plant in Michigan, would sit in meetings with the EPA, and the House Ag Committee would call them up to the Hill and say, "Why aren't you accelerating these types of biologicals? We want them accelerated." And so we worked out a way to get them more. Because Marrone Bio did have some pioneering products that were very different from what the agency had seen before, to be fair to the EPA. But at the same time, it was slowed down such that instead of 18 months, it would maybe take 3 to 4 years to get a biological. That could kill a company. Mm-hmm. So we fixed the system. It was very lonely. A lot of companies would not join up with me because they were afraid of the backlash and getting EPA audits. And indeed, we got 3 EPA audits after that. And so, but the EPA staff was very happy with the changes because they wanted to get these things out the door. And it was a compromise between what the industry was going to do and promise in having the type of things we put in our packages and the quality of the packages, because the PREA law had some wiggle room in how you put in those packages. That wiggle room is gone. And so it's much more predictable process. So I tell entrepreneurs, hey, just because you have a barrier in front of you, I'm sorry, it's not a good enough excuse. You got to find a way to knock it down.
Well, I was just going to say that you not only pioneered a segment from the science side, okay, but you also pioneered on the business side how to get it to market. And congratulations to you. You really blazed the trail for very many future biological companies. I
don't tell that story too often, but I do know that some of the EPA staff who I see former staff who I see from time to time are still a little bit bruised, but I think we've patched things up.
You go get them. I like it. That is awesome. But and I think farmers are like that too. They don't give up easily, and they keep on going. But really,
they have to. That's their livelihood. That's right. And it was my livelihood.
Well, a new segment and the pressures of the investors and a small company, a startup, and you got to get to revenue. Wow. I mean, that's it's pretty amazing what you did to get through that and navigate it. Plus the additional fundraising that would have been required as stuff gets.
That's right. That's right.
To keep people interested and keep adding on to it. So
that's right.
So talk to us a little bit about that side, the investor. What are these venture capitalists or other investors? What are they looking for? And how did you meet them? How did you make all that magic happen on the investor relations side?
It is so different today than it was back then. I mean, today there's a zillion incubators and accelerators and all kinds of efforts to incubate and cocoon and help advise startup entrepreneurs in ag and others. And back then I was all alone. So I actually, being a Ph.D. entomologist and I starting up AgriQuest, I said, well, how am I going to raise money? So I went to Silicon Valley, big law firm, well-known, Wilson Sonsini. I took a boot camp on how to raise money, and they taught me what a term sheet was and what the deal should be like, and the key, get a really good lawyer, and which I did, and I started just. This is so funny because this was 95, and got to remember the internet wasn't going. I mean, we didn't have the big internet then. Okay, so Netscape was going public that year, so I had hard copy books. California Venture Capital Association and National Venture Capital Association. And the young people laugh when I show them this big book. So I flipped through the pages and I yellow lined all the different venture capitalists that I thought would be interested in my business. And I called them cold. And I called Don Valentine from Seven Rosen Funds. He's since retired. And he was like, I had no idea. He was like a god in the VC world. He was so nice. And she's like, who's this? Probably was thinking, who's this crazy woman calling me out of the blue? But he said, well, we don't invest in that, but I do know somebody who does. And he introduced me to the chairman of Calvert Social Investments. Calvert is a very big set of mutual funds, one of the very original ESG funds, environmental social governance funds. And they had a venture capital arm. And he said, well, Pam, you're not a year old yet, AgriQuest. So come back when you're past your year time frame. So I know you're still in business. And then you can pitch our social venture network. And I said, what's that? It's a group of like about 200 investors who are interested in environmentally responsible, socially responsible, and women and minority-led businesses. Wow, that was way ahead of their time in 95. So I went to Chicago in 1996, pitched the business, and lo and behold, there was somebody from Rockefeller and Company that had a fund that was dedicated to ESG investing. And they led our first round. This was, by the way, after I started up with friends and family money and my own money and the seed money. And then Series A raised close to 4 million and then 60 million later after that. But it's a lot of hard work. You're a salesperson. You need a sales pipeline of investors. And young entrepreneurs will come to me today, and they plan 6 months to raise their Series A, and I'm going, are you kidding me? So it takes a lot longer and takes much more work than they ever think it will be. And it is a pipeline management kind of thing. So the more investors you talk to, the more likely you're going to find ones that invest. So that's that I work really hard. So that's how I did it. Yeah.
Again, another amazing part of your story, and I hope everybody hears this. So one of the things that's very interesting to me is making that transition from the research, technologist, okay, to the business CEO, and also to the chief sales. You're the chief everything officer, right?
Yeah.
So you're selling the product. You're selling the investor. You're selling a team to come work with you to further develop the products. You're selling the government. I mean, you had a 5-sided sale, really, to make
exactly
it all happen. One of the things I see with a lot of startups is they are started by the engineer, the technician type. And it's very, very difficult for that person to to have a business mind and that salesperson mind. What advice would you have with them? How do you, do they have it or they don't? Or is there certain things you had to study and really dive in on to get that extra element to make it work?
I actually think you have it or you don't. I don't know if Harvard Business School will say that's true. The MBAs of the world will say that's true, but I think some of it can be taught, like how to network or how to sell yourself or things like that. But I advise a lot of entrepreneurs, and I've met a lot of entrepreneurs in my life, and I am one. And I really think you have it or not. And what it is getting out there. It is being the chief salesperson. And if you can't be the chief salesperson, now you can be trained to move your language from too technical, because in the early days I was told I was too technical. And if you're too technical and you use all the jargon instead of dumbing it down to sixth grade level, you can be taught to do that. But getting yourself out there, finding a network, finding people, networking like crazy, and finding people to help you, those really you have to like to do it. You have to like to raise money. I always tell, entrepreneurs, if you're the CEO and founder, you have the title of CEO, it's your job to raise the money. Don't expect somebody else to do it for you. And if you don't like being that salesperson, then you have the wrong job. You shouldn't be CEO. Maybe you would like to be CSO, or CTO. And so for me, because I have the Ph.D., it was kind of a noose around my neck, just simply because I had the Ph.D., I was pigeonholed, and I hadn't been in the lab. So my boss at Monsanto took me out of the lab after year one and said, "You're meant to be a manager." Not that I did bad science, but that was my personality. So I hadn't been in the lab since 1985, yet I had investors saying, "Well, you should be CTO." I go, "I don't know how I would do that. I have teams for that." So I had to work especially hard to change my language to talk like I knew something about the market and business. And nowadays, the good news is when they have these incubators and National Science Foundation, ICOR program, everything, they have the entrepreneurs talk to customers. And there's nothing better than learning the language of business by talking to your customers. So Pheronym, one company I advised, went through ICOR, 100 customers we had to talk to. As the industry mentor, I opened my Rolodex and they talked to a lot of customers. And that's fantastic for the entrepreneur to listen to what the customer is saying instead of just being technology focused.
So key point to those startups that are listening in on this podcast is that if you, like you said, if you aren't the person who wants to raise the money, you need to probably have a co-founder or a team that's designated to do that, because that is definitely a part of your future. And I know a lot of engineers, it's tough to make that business, transition when they're technical. So
yeah, some will, some won't. As I said, I see quite a lot that will, but you're right, not everyone. I have a couple that I don't think going to make it either.
So that's, Steve Blank popularized it. You mentioned ICOR, those kind of things. Talk to your customers and ask them open-ended questions, trying to get a feel for the market, the business model canvas, and all that fun stuff. And you mentioned incubators that you're involved with, and I think there's one incubator that you're a partner with in just outside of Davis there. And you
AgStart.
There you go, AgStart. Tell us about AgStart, the incubator, and those kind of things. And you also referenced Pheronym that you and I are involved with. So tell us a little bit about, you mentioned at one time incubators did not exist when you were doing what you do. Now they exist. No. What are they for? How do they help ag technology companies get going?
Well, there's two sides of the incubators like AgStart. So there's advising on the business aspects, and then there's actually a lab. And so what we were lacking in the greater Sacramento region was actually a lab incubator for startups. So John Sellup, who really is the force behind AgStart, has done an amazing job of being able to get real estate company for the building and donors to help build the lab at AgStart. And that's where Pheronym is now, and several other companies. One, Turtle Tree Labs, just using making milk proteins in fermentation, just raised a lot of money. There's some really cool companies there. And so whether it's IndieBio or Yield Lab or AgStart, there's the key to these incubators is providing that network of professionals that can help the startup go faster. And so, because investors want to see, you asked about what investors want. Well, of course, they want a return on their investment. And it's really hard in ag because it's such a much longer cycle time. And so adapting the typical metrics for a VC fund for tech, IT, software, et cetera, is not going to work for ag. But these accelerators can help you get past the early phase faster and scale faster with the professional network around and introductions to investors, how to make your pitch deck, how to pitch, how to do go-to-market strategy, talk to your customers. This is where incubators and accelerators are really helpful. So
we'll dive in a little bit on the Ferritum, which I had an opportunity to be a part of with you. They're a company in this accelerator, and they're probably facing a lot of the challenges that you saw when you were getting started. How do you do the regulations? This is a whole new space, right? You got the Ph.D. founder. How does she raise money and those kind of things? It's does it kind of remind you of you a few years ago?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I'll tell you, the best entrepreneurs and investors will tell you this: the best entrepreneurs are the coachable ones. Every entrepreneur is very strong-headed because they wouldn't be an entrepreneur if you weren't. But you have to listen to what other people are saying and it's like pattern recognition. You'll have one person say something and another one might say an opposite, but you talk to 5 people and there may be some patterns in what they're saying about your business, and you better listen to those patterns and adjust and course correct if needed. Yeah.
Did you ever think, in the future, when you're in the midst of it and growing your company and those kind of things, did you think that you'd be in this role of helping others in the future? And what's that been like? How rewarding is it?
Oh yeah, I did. I may be taking a temporary leave from being a founder. I still have a couple more ideas in the future. But I'm not sure I want to be CEO anymore. I think I'll find a younger CEO and then I'll be executive chairman. But I love advising because I can have a broad impact. If I can make one more entrepreneur in ag bio successful, then, or even not just ag bio, anywhere, and particularly women entrepreneurs, then it just gives me so much satisfaction, and I want to give back, so it really is a lot of fun right now advising. Yeah.
I think that's interesting, and you make a great point about women entrepreneurs. The agricultural industry is very male dominated. I'm on the retail side more, so the farmers male, many of the salespeople are male. They're, that's changing over time.
It is.
Still, it's nowhere close to 50%. What was that like for you on the, manufacturer research development side in what you've been through? And do you think that extra, that helped that fight in you to get to fight through all these things that you had to make happen?
Oh, absolutely. I definitely had something to prove, but I didn't think about it that much. It was really funny because typically raising money, to be at a venture fair in front of, VCs or whatever, I'd be the only woman in the room. I stood out. So that helped. Being the only woman, I was definitely stood out. But with farmers, I have a Ph.D. in entomology from NC State and an undergraduate from Cornell. So I came in with a lot of credibility also, and I can talk, science and talk, and listen big time with farmers is listening to their problems and do you have any solutions? And so I love talking to farmers. And so I never felt I had any, and the farm dogs always love me.
There you go.
Dogs always come up to me and slobber me. So, but that I always had I always loved talking to farmers, and so that was really and always made sure I'd spend a lot of my time as CEO of all the companies going out and talking to farmers. That's critical because that would then I'd bring that back to R&D or to sales and say, you have to listen to this because this is what the farmers are saying about our products and such. So, yeah.
Well, that's interesting. And I think, you would encourage any entrepreneurs, don't let anything hold you back. Don't, whatever your education, your sex, your, background, anything like that, anything's possible, right?
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. And today is a fantastic time to be an entrepreneur. I was just talking to somebody who has worked for 3 venerable companies in the industry and was thinking about going off on her own. I talked to her yesterday, and she was describing why she wanted to. And she said, I just need to do it my way because I have this picture of the way I want a company to work. And I was like, bingo. See, it's not just about the science or the product. It's about the milieu, the culture, the values of the company. And so why do we become serial entrepreneurs? Because we get a company to a certain point, successful, whatever, but a company then gets to a certain size and it has a life of its own. And it's no longer the founder having control. And so it takes a life that may be a little different than maybe what you originally wanted in culture. And so then you got to do it again to get it maybe to that near perfect again. And then again. And so, she said, well, I just have this perfect ideal of what I want to do. I said, it may not be perfect, but you maybe by your second or third time, you might get it closer, but it's never going to be perfect to the ideal that you want because people are people.
Yep. And we're not perfect, are we?
No. And you make mistakes. And my biggest mistakes have been in hiring people. So
yeah. It's the key to success is picking the right people, because really, in the way you're describing that, when you found a company, it's like a child. It's got your DNA and fingerprint on it, and you can get it set up and going. But eventually, they grow into their own person.
Exactly.
I've seen that with California Ag Solutions. You can still see our Robin and I's fingerprint on it, but the longer it goes, and Silas and his team and the leadership there, you see it evolving and changing its own character. And I think it's great. You see that you built something that can continue to grow and prosper and change, because if one thing's for sure in California agriculture, it's change. So
no, there's no question there. And the farmers California, with all its regulations and lawsuits and consumer push pressure and propositions and what have you, the farmers have to be the most innovative of anywhere.
It keeps it fun.
Well, they might not say that, but
it's fun like a hit to the head or something. So, so what we had a little entrepreneurial bug mentioned there. What's the next right thing for Pam, and what's your future look like in your work and your coaching and everything else? What's on the horizon?
Well, it's funny. I joined the board of an anti-arthritis drug discovery company was founded by the gods in the field and discovered the biggest blockbuster drugs on the planet. And, some of them are in their 80s and they're still founding companies. And so, they said to me, well, Pam, you don't need to stop. I mean, so I was like, because I figured, maybe I've done 3 and that's enough. And then it got me thinking that there's still a lot of problems to solve. And there's some really, really, I'm not going to reveal what it is, but there's some really, really technically difficult challenges that nobody wants to tackle because they're too hard technically, but I think I know how to solve them. And again, it's really tough being a CEO founder, and the day-to-day is just so intensive. And I think maybe I'll find a younger woman entrepreneur and be CEO, and then be executive chairman, so I can guide it based on what I think I know in terms of how to solve this. But there's still some big challenges on how to convert more land to biologicals and more organic land, more conventional land to organic. There's some big problems to solve in there that I'd like to tackle. Yeah.
There's challenges with plant health and protection. There's challenges with nutrient balance is one of the biggest challenges
right.
I see. And I think we need to look at it from not so much, I think the technology is getting there too, to where we can look at it, not what the practices were to produce the product, because you can have nutrient devoid, crappy tasting organic food. Okay.
That's very true, actually.
You can have
That's true.
dense, extremely safe, conventionally produced food. Okay?
That's very true.
So, and I think in the regenerative world, you see this happening too, where Savory and some others are going after the outcome based.
Right.
What was the outcome on the land? Not, okay, yes, I grazed it this way, I planted these cover crops and blah, blah, blah. No, they're measuring the carbon, they're measuring the nutrient density of the food. They're all that, I think, rather than just being the thing I hate about organic, it's just a list of no's. Right? You can't use this stuff. You can only use a subset of tools. And I think sometimes you need to have the metric wrenches in the toolbox, not cheat with the English wrenches. So
yeah, the organic industry recognizes that, like the founders of the organic movement. And so Rodale is got the regenerative organic seal that they're working on and practices. And for sure, organic is moving towards regenerative organic. And there are cases where someone is, like you said, has really good outcomes, but they might need to spray once. There was a farmer that's very famous. He goes out and talks all the time. And, he had to spray to desiccate his potato vines. And he used a chemical because it just couldn't pencil out with an organic version. So there's some examples of that. Now we'd love to be, all regenerative organic, but it may not happen. Now there are these folks looking at, is it practice based or is it? Yeah, USDA has to grapple with this. Is it when you're going to pay farmers? Is it going to be for practices or outcomes? And I agree with you. I think outcomes is going to be the way to go. Yeah.
The key is the measuring of the outcome, right? That's why we don't have that. When we come up with the sensors, the technology to measure, and it's getting closer and closer because we can measure all the metabolites now and residues and
that's right.
Things.
That's right.
We're so much closer. So there's one idea for you to run with, Pam, if you need two instead of just one startup opportunity.
Well, you mentioned something about precision tech. There is in integrated pest management, there's a convergence of tech and bio. So biologicals are going to be enabled by tech tools. Semios is a great example of that. So farmers don't have to go out and manually put twist ties in the field anymore for pheromones or monitor manually with their clipboard. They can log right into their computer and then spray from their computer. So smart sprayers, drone spraying, all these types of real-time spore monitoring for fungal diseases like root applied sciences. So there's going to be so much technology applied to IPM that's going to help biologicals even more. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially because, current IPM, we're hoping that we check the right parts of the field too.
Right, right.
That was one of the things we always wanted to develop, and we worked on that, was to get change over time images to see what parts of the field were differentiating from the mean different than others so that we could do smart scouting. And that
and the traditional measures of IPM, so building the bugs up to a specific threshold and then knocking it down. Today's products don't work that way. Right. So you're going to have to start earlier in a more preventative program and a more season-long holistic program rather than the traditional way we've done IPM. So that's a big lesson for the land grants. Hopefully they're learning that.
Avoid the problem instead of, knock down the problem. So yeah, it changes the timing and the thresholds.
It does.
But like you said, technology is going to help that.
Yep.
So Chestnut BioAdvisors is a way to follow up and stay in touch with you. What are other ways that people can connect with you, Pam, and start a conversation?
Pam Marrone at gmail.com, but also most people come through the LinkedIn portal and link with me there. And that's how they find me. And we start a conversation. And I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and I always say the first hour is free.
There you go. That makes sense. Make the most of it.
Yeah.
And then what are something else I should have asked you today that I didn't get to?
Well, let's see. We talked about a lot.
A lot of fun.
We did. We talked about a lot. I'm not finding, I'm thinking that we talked about, I think, one of the key points is that, we as the carbon credits are given to farmers and the payments to farmers for changing their practices. And as you said, getting certain outcomes, it's really important that biologicals are there front and center in that conversation and don't get left out. So, the industry is now immersed in that and making sure that, there isn't locked in processes and procedures that lock out biologicals. So I think that's really critical right now.
And I think like what you said with the biologicals are part of a system approach on the
exactly
side. Those biological companies also need to consider maybe not them themselves, but having strategic partnerships with people on the output side, then can drive the carbon credit value, can drive the minimal impact value back to the customer so that the farmer can earn more on a per acre basis.
Exactly.
Which then allows that biocontrol company to have the price point that they need to justify what they're doing. So it's kind of a three-way partnership. You got the output, the input, and the farmer together to make everything rise together.
Yes, I absolutely agree. But it's interesting. Just one other thing to mention is that when you look at polls of farmers and their awareness of biologicals, it's still really low. It's surprisingly low. I think the last Farm Journal poll I saw was like half of the farmers either needed more education or were not aware. And I'm going like, oh my God. So we still, because it's littered with small companies, even though there's a lot of big companies doing biologicals, their largest business is chemicals or seeds. And so, the awareness building is often left to the smaller companies or the trade groups. And so we still have a lot of work to do to get the message out about the value of these products and that they can increase ROI, they can increase quality, nutrient density, carbon footprint, and all of these things. And we still have a lot of work to do to get that message out.
Well, I appreciate you helping us get that message out. And, fortunately, the farmers we get to work with understand that, but we don't get to work with everybody just yet, Pam. So there's more people to work with. So.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, I certainly thank you for your time today. It's just amazing the path that you have blazed for entrepreneurs, for research scientists. What you have done to accomplish what you've accomplished is just very amazing. And I thank you very much for what you've done for farmers, the ag industry, and for entrepreneurs.
Well, thank you very much. It's really been fun.
All right. You take care.
Oh, we hope you enjoyed this podcast today. Seriously, Dr. Marrone's work is fantastic, and her passion for constantly learning, evaluating, and exploring is both encouraging and energizing. It's just exciting to bring guests on the podcast with such passion and vision for their work. And we're passionate here too about helping growers implement soil health practices. To learn more, check out our website at asn.farm, and there you can click on links to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. There's a lot of great things happening and always something to learn. Thanks for listening.